Every single night, millions of people sit down to eat something they think they understand. They pick up a fork, they cut through that perfect crust, they taste that rich, buttery, almost sinful flavor, and they have absolutely no idea. No idea where it really came from. No idea who fought over it. No idea how close it came to never existing at all. Because butter steak, that thing you've ordered at restaurants, cooked at home, seen on every cooking show, it has a past, a hidden past, a billion-dollar industry built on someone else's genius. Let's go back, way back, not to a fancy French restaurant, not to a New York steakhouse with white tablecloths. We're going to the 1800s, to the American frontier, where cattle were everything. Beef was survival. Beef was currency. Beef was power. But here's what they don't tell you in history class. The men and women who first figured out how to cook beef properly, they weren't celebrated chefs. Many of them were cowboys on trail drives, working with almost nothing: a fire, a cast-iron skillet, some salt, and butter. Because butter was one of the only fats that didn't spoil fast. It traveled well, and when you basted meat in it over high heat, something almost magical happened. That fat would coat the surface. It would brown and caramelize. It would create a crust, deep, golden, almost armored, that locked every single drop of juice inside the meat. Nobody called it butter steak back then. They just called it dinner. But make no mistake, that technique, that discovery, it would eventually be worth billions, and almost nobody who discovered it would ever see a single dollar. Now, here's where it gets complicated. Because while frontier Americans were doing this out of necessity, on the other side of the world, in France, chefs were doing it out of obsession. There was a man, Auguste Escoffier. If you've never heard that name, stop, because Escoffier is arguably the most important person in the entire history of how we eat today. He codified French cuisine, he invented the modern restaurant kitchen, and yes, he perfected the butter-basted. He called it arroser, to baste, to constantly spoon hot herb-infused butter over meat as it cooks. He said, and this is crucial, that the butter was not a topping, it was not a garnish, it was the cooking medium, it was the flavor architect. But here's the thing about Escoffier. He was European, he was celebrated, he had the platform, and the Cowboys, eating meat in the American South for generations before any of this, they got nothing. No credit, no recognition, no legacy. Wait, because we need to talk about something most food channels will skip. The history of American cooking, real American cooking, cannot be told without acknowledging who was actually in those kitchens. They basted meats, they slow-cooked cuts that European chefs would have discarded. They developed techniques over generations, passed down through oral tradition, through memory, through survival later someone else took credit for. The Southern cooking that Americans are so proud of, much of it has black hands at its origin. And when we talk about butter steak, about rich, slow-basted, deeply flavored beef, we have to acknowledge that lineage. Because ignoring it isn't just historically wrong, it's a lie we tell ourselves every time we sit down to eat. Fast forward to the 20th century, suddenly butter steak has a rebrand. It's no longer frontier food, it's not survival cooking, now it's Haute cuisine. Now it's being served at high-end restaurants in New York, Chicago, London. Now it has French names and white tablecloths and sommeliers. And the people who invented the technique, they're invisible. Here's where the business empire enters the story, because someone very smart looked at butter steak and saw not just a meal, but a machine. In the mid-20th century, American steakhouse culture exploded. Post-war prosperity, a booming middle class, men who wanted to feel powerful, and nothing said power like a thick, sizzling steak drowning in golden butter. Restaurants like Peter Luger's in New York opened in 1887 but hitting its legendary peak in the 1950s, built entire empires on this one concept. Their secret? Brutally simple. Dry-aged beef, screaming hot broiler, and butter. Always butter. No truffle oil, no molecular gastronomy, just that ancient, borderline primitive technique that cowboys had been doing in the dirt 100 years earlier. But Peter Luger got the Michelin star. Peter Luger got the magazine covers. Peter Luger got famous. Now, here's the part that will genuinely blow your mind, because it's not just history, it's science, and the science of butter steak is almost unbelievable. When butter hits a scorching hot pan with meat, it's not just melting. A reaction is happening. Scientists call it the Maillard reaction, a chemical process between amino acids and sugars that creates hundreds of new flavor compounds simultaneously. It's the same reaction that makes bread crust smell incredible, that makes coffee smell like morning, that makes roasted garlic smell like heaven. But butter adds something extra that oil cannot. Milk proteins, sugars, fat-soluble compounds that carry flavor into the meat at a molecular level. When you baste a steak in butter, you are literally injecting flavor through the surface of the meat, layer by layer, molecule by molecule. The ancient cooks who discovered this didn't know the science, but their tongues told them the truth. So here's the question that should haunt you. If you took that frontier cowboy, dusty boots, campfire, cast iron skillet, and sat him down in a modern steakhouse, would he even recognize what they're serving? The butter steak of today is almost unrecognizable from its origins. Today, you can order a Wagyu butter-basted steak for $400 in Tokyo, New York, and Dubai. You can buy compound butters mixed with black truffle, blue cheese, roasted garlic, herbs from Provence that cost more per ounce than gold. The technique hasn't changed, but the price tag, the exclusivity, the who gets to eat it, that has changed completely. But here's the twist. You are still doing it. Maybe not with $400 Wagyu, maybe with a grocery store ribeye, maybe on a Tuesday night with the kids watching TV. And when you spoon that hot, foaming butter over your steak, when you add those crushed garlic cloves and that sprig of thyme, you are connected directly to every person who ever did this before you. The cowboy on the trail, the cook in the plantation kitchen, the chef in Paris. They're all in that pan with you, and that, somehow, makes it taste even better. All right, you've stayed this long, so I'm going to tell you the thing that food historians whisper, but food channels never say out loud. Butter steak is an American myth. Not in the sense that it doesn't exist. You've eaten it, you know it exists. But the story of butter steak, the one the restaurants tell, the cooking shows sell, is almost completely fabricated. The invention that gets credited to European fine dining, borrowed. The American steakhouse tradition that makes cities like New York and Chicago famous, built on techniques that were never theirs to begin with. The secret that chefs charge you $60 a plate to experience, figured out over an open fire by people who never had a choice. Because the best food in the world was never created by wealth. It was created by necessity, by genius, by hands that history chose to forget. Every meal has a history. Every recipe has a thief. and every bite you take carries the memory of someone who cooked it first. Butter steak isn't just food. It's a story of power, erasure, genius, and hunger. And now you know the real recipe. If you love discovering the hidden truth behind the food you eat every single day, the stories they don't put on the menu, then subscribe right now. Because history tastes completely different when you know who paid the price.